Sleep after. Yeah. No problem. Good to see you.
Okay. Okay.
Well, you have to excuse me. I need you for all the tricks. Okay, Adam, I was just telling Ronnie and Akiva that we've been doing hard stuff in the Gemara. So we're going to get a certain amount of easier stuff coming. Stay tuned. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. The Gemara's going to throw us some easier stuff just to balance things out a little bit. We're going to hang it in there, the heavy stuff. Okay, the discussion we've been learning now, we've gotten into Mukseh. We've gotten into Mukseh, but also more recently, we've been focusing in on Tumah, a garment, something which is classified as a garment. Garment is able to reach 29b1. A garment receives contamination. The Torah says that the garment receives contamination. And the Gemara is trying to explain the argument in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah brought an argument whether a garment that was folded over, and you wanted it, and you did not singe it yet, and the purpose when you're folding it over, you're rolling it to make it into a wick. If you would have singed it, if you would have lit it on fire, then it's no longer a garment. It would become a wick, and it would not be able to receive contamination. As a garment, it had the status of it had the ability to receive contamination, right? If a dead mouse or some of these creeping 8 shrutzim would come in contact when they're dead. If they come in contact with the garment, or if the garment would be in the tent of a corpse of a dead person, the garment would become contaminated. As long as it's a garment, it has the ability to become contaminated. But when it loses the status of a garment into this wick, and it does not have the ability to become contaminated. But now, so the Gemara wants to understand what is the argument whether this wick. Now again, if the wick would have been completed by singeing it, it won't be able to receive contamination. But here, it wasn't singed; it was just folded, and that was the case of the Mishnah. So the Gemara said, Rav Hamnuna explained that at the Mishnah, our Mishnah's discussion is of a garment which is larger than 3 fingers by 3 fingers, because if it's less than 3 fingers by 3 fingers, it will not receive contamination. It's less than 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, less than 11 inches by 11 inches, because if the garment is more than 11 inches, it automatically, right, Adam, will receive contamination. So you're in this in-between stage. It's wool or linen that has the ability to receive contamination once it's 3 fingers by 3 fingers. But the issue here is we're talking about a garment that was designated for a low use, a derogatory low type of use, and that actually knocks it out from being a garment. Like we said, it's used as a shmata. It's used as a rag, but it's not a big rag. It's a small rag that's used for low type of work. What do you call it? Menial type of thing? Is that the right word, Mr. Lawyer? Right? Is that right? It's used for low type of work, like to hold the pot when you're pouring out the contents of the pot, or to wipe away the dust of the mill, or to use as a stopper that the water shouldn't come out of the pipe. When you want to stop the water going into the bathhouse, you don't want the bathhouse to overflood. So it's like this type of item, it lost its status as a garment because of the fact that it was designated for a low type of use. And the Gemara explains that, but then you did something. You did an action after you knocked it out from being a garment by designating it for a low type of use. You did an action that looks like it's bringing it back to the status of a garment, making America great again. right? You're bringing it back to the status of a garment, and that would bring it, and then it would receive contamination, just like a person, they pass away after 120, then what happens? Then he come back. We pray people there'll be Mashiach will come, there'll be the resurrection of the dead. There's going to be this garment is coming back to life as a garment. It lost its status, it comes back. But the question is, what is that action that a person could do that could show that it goes back to the status of a garment? What type of level action? If you put it into a box, that shows you it's important. You store it away in a box. But what about if you didn't do it in the box? So that is the Gemara's discussion. So the Gemara now says like the following. So we said, if you threw the garment into the garbage after you designated for one, you designated for one of these low type of activities, and then you threw it in the garbage, then it's definitely tahar. Then it's definitely remains not being able to receive contamination. You threw in the garbage. Definitely, you're knocking it out from becoming back to a garment. What are we talking about? And the Gemara says if you put it into a box, that means you're storing it away. It's important to put it into a box, right? You store it in a box. See, Adam has turned the page with me. That's very good, right? 29b. I'm just talking out the right 29b1. If you put it into a box, everybody holds in, then it would lose. It goes back to being a garment. You put it into a box. And the last thing we said yesterday, we're going back to, let's say, a couple lines from the top of 29b1, is lo nechleku ela shetolo b'magod or shaniach acher adelet. You hung this garment, the shmata, that was designated to clean the dust of the mill, or one of those other menial type of tasks. Shetolo b'magod. You hung it on a peg, a wooden peg. You put it in the back of the door. So these actions do not show, are not comparable to putting it in a box, but you didn't throw in the garbage. You didn't leave it by the garbage dump, and putting it on the peg is they seem to be more shows more of you're keeping it important than hanging it just the back of a door. So it's like maybe saying on the peg is like more like on the shelf of some sort, of something. So now those are the situations where we brought a three-way argument in the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer holds, since you did not throw it into the garbage, you didn't put it by the garbage dump, this shmata. So, and you hung it on the peg. Put it back in the door. You plan on using it, and the fact that you stored it, and you didn't just leave it around on the floor or whatever it was. That shows you that you want it to be like a garment, and therefore it goes back to the status of a garment, and it could receive contamination. And that's how you could explain when it says in that Mishnah that the Gemara quoted, when he said Bein min hamuchan, means whether you put it into a basket, a box. That means that shows you that it's prepared, that you want to use it, or Bein she'ein min hamuchan, or if you was not in a basket, it was hung on the wall or back of the door, that's also considered will receive contamination. That's what the Gemara says. Let's see the Gemara. My korele shalom amuchan. Why does Rebbe Lezer call when you put a back of the peg, the back of the door hang it up on the peg, on the wooden peg? Why is it called not prepared? we're saying that you're saying that the fact that you did that action, you didn't throw in the garbage dump, shows you that you want to use it. So what do you mean it's not prepared? So it is prepared. So for use. So the Gemara said the legabe kupsa in if you know what, when you put two next to each other, Lot was afraid to be live next to Avram. Why Lot didn't want to live next to Avram? He looks bad compared to Avram when he's taking. But if Lot would be on his own compared to everybody else, he's a great guy. So Lot says, I don't want to be next to Abraham. So too over here. This shmata, if when this rag is on a peg or back of the door, if you compare it to being putting in the box, putting in the box gives a much more significance than putting it back in the door. So therefore, in contrast to that, that's called prepared. This is not called prepared for use. But compared to the garbage dump, this is much greater than the garbage dump because you actually put it on, you hung it up on the peg, and therefore it is ready for use. The Gemara says, compared to being in the box, is that it's considered like not being ready for use. Because it's less showing its importance when you hang it up on a peg or back of a door than putting it into a box. But still, the fact that you did not put in the garbage dump, you still plans on using it, and it goes back to the status of a garment. Yeshua says, listen, you didn't put it into the box. We are now 29b, 1. Towards the bottom of side 1, 3 paragraphs from the bottom. Yeshua did not put it into the basket, to the box, betuli batle. That shows you don't want it. You don't really want it. You want it to remain in the status of non-garment, and therefore it does not. And it's low, like its original low designation that you designated for. Therefore, Rabbi Yeshua holds does not receive contamination. And when he says bein menamuchan, bein shalom menamuchan, does not receive contamination, means bein menamuchan, whether you want to put on the peg, or bein shalom menamuchan, whether you didn't, but he threw in the garbage dump, it's tahor. It's not going to receive contamination. Amai karile muchan. If you're telling me it doesn't receive contamination, even when it's in back of the door, and even when it's on the peg, so why is it called prepared? If you're telling me it's not prepared for use, because you're telling me it doesn't receive contamination, so how can you call it muchan? The same idea the Gemara says. Compared to the garbage dump, it's considered more usable when you put something on a peg or back of a door. You're showing it's still in the game than throwing it in the garbage dump, but it's still not enough to say that it reached the bar, so to speak, that it's considered prepared sufficiently that it would go back to the status of a garment. The Gabe Ashba, in contrast to the garbage dump, Muchanu, is considered prepared. The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva is the third opinion. He makes this difference between the peg and the back. You hung up the shmata, this garment, this more than 3 finger by 3 finger garment on a peg. Is between a peg and a back of a door. A back of a door, he says, is less of an action than on a peg, on a nice wooden peg in your kitchen or wherever it is. And therefore, the back of the door, if you hung it, it's not going to receive contamination. But if you put it on the peg, on the wooden peg, and you hung it up, that's already more ready for use and would receive contamination. He makes a distinction between those items. That's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Kiva holds. Tlo b'magod, we want to welcome Asaf to the screen. Tlo magod, if you hung it on the peg. Ksava Rabbi Eliezer. Asaf, we're learning about the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who makes a distinction between where you hung up this garment, which is very small, whether that's depending where you keep something shows how much you care about the item and how useful the item is and what level the item is. So he makes a distinction. If you put something on a wooden peg, you hung up the shmata, the cloth, the small cloth on a wooden peg, that's significant enough that you want to use it in a way that you care about it that has some importance. And if something is important, it has the ability to receive contamination. But if something has no significance, it does, or very insignificant, and it's very small, right? It's less than 3 tvachim, and it's less than 11 inches. It will not have the ability to receive contamination. So the Gemara says, he says, when you put it back of the door, that's an instant, it doesn't show importance so much. Therefore, he holds that would be considered not like a garment. Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, if you put on the peg, on the wooden peg, then it would receive contamination. Put it back in the door, that's not significant type of act that you want to use it in a serious way, in a positive, very strong way. It's like Yeshua that it will not receive contamination. Then the Gemara says, V'hada, and so we see here in this Mishnah, which is found somewhere else, right? This Mishnah the Gemara just quoted is found in Kalim, which discusses tahirot, purity, and we see there's an argument Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua regarding a garment that was designated for a light type of use, a menial type of work, and then you raised it a certain level of importance. Rav Nuna holds that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are arguing the same argument in our Mishnah regarding this piece of garment, this patila, that you fold it over, if it's tahar or not. This piece of garment that you went ahead and you folded, is this garment at this state, when you fold it over to making into a wick, did it lose its status of a garment, and therefore it will not receive contamination, or it will not lose its status of a garment, and it would have the ability to receive contamination when you did this act of folding it over, folding the garment, and it's less than 3 tvachim, more than 3 fingers, because you folded it for the purpose of making it into a wick, and it wasn't singed yet, did it already lose its status? The same way they argue in the Mishnah Kalim, the same rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Akiva argue over here. And based on our Mishnah, the Gemara says, V'hada be Rabbi Akiva the Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Akiva changed his mind and he retracted to agree with Rabbi Yeshua, because we see in our Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Yeshua that it does not receive contamination. It lost its status of a garment when it's designated, when it's not in its stat, when you removed it from that garment stage, you made it for something which is not so significant, and you did something with it, and because Rabbi Akiva says in our Mishnah Tahori that it's tahar. Okay. Now, and in these two situations, okay, we have Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara says, "Bimai, how do you know that our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva, changed his mind? Maybe our Mishnah is talking about a garment that you put in the back of the door." And Rabbi Akiva says, if you put something in the back of the door, a garment you put it back of the door, it loses its status because it's the door. He made the distinction between the back of the door on the peg. He said the back of the door is a lower type of showing of use than putting on the peg. And maybe our Mishnah is talking about that type of case, a beged, that you went ahead and you folded over, and maybe you put it in the back of the door. Maybe that's the case. So the Gemara says, Omarova midiktani petilat habeged. The Mishnah says petilat habeged. So now, what's the proof which says petilat habeged? So the Tani petilat habeged litany. The Mishnah should have said petilat shel beged. You should have said a piece of a garment. which a piece from a garment is that like how do you make a wick? A wick, you take a piece from a garment and you fold it over, you make a wick. My betilat habeged. Why does it say the word betilat habeged? The piece of the garment. It's not piece from a garment. It should have said a piece of a garment. It says a piece of a garment means that what that dayin begedu, that the garment that you made the wick from, it still has a importance of garment. Meaning, why is it called garment? Because you hung it up on the back of the door on the peg. And since you it still has the status of a garment, right? Meaning, meaning because you didn't throw it in the garbage dump, you hung it up, and yet he says it's not mekabel toma, it doesn't receive contamination. So we see that he changed his mind that even something that you put on the peg does not receive contamination. That's a hard point. This last point. Let's look at the Rashi. Explain this a little better. Look at the Rashi Midiktani. So Rashi's Midiktani before the Mishnah. The Mishnah's piece habeged. The mashma that it's a piece of a garment. It's still in the garment family. The choshev einav, it still has some importance in his eyes. Now that will only be true if you hung it up on a peg. And Rabbi Akiva says it's still tahar. It's still pure. Why? Because hung it up on a peg is not enough. You have to put it into the box if you want to say it's going to be if higher level use shows importance. But if you just hung it on a peg, that's not enough. And Rashi says shel beged mashma. Shel beged implies that you folded it from a garment. Ha beged implies that it's a garment itself. You took an actual garment and you folded it. And that's what the Gemara is saying over here, that Rabbi Akiva holds that even though it's a garment, and the Gemara's understanding, if you're calling it a garment, that means it's you put it up on the peg, not just the back of a door. And yet doesn't receive contamination. In life, our job is to make sure that we as human beings don't receive contamination. The holiday of Sukkot is around the corner. And one of the things about the holiday of Sukkot, we once said, the materials for the schach have to be, the covering have to be from materials that don't have the ability to receive the contamination. Those bamboo sticks cannot receive contamination, which is symbolic to us. We have to live a life that we don't receive contamination. We got to the Mishnah, everybody. It's going to get a little easier coming up a little bit very soon. All the best. Thank you. Looking forward to tomorrow. Take care, Ronnie, Asaf, everybody. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Have a great day.